Let me start off by asking you, Kaushik, what exactly is product management for the noobs?
Yeah, yeah, sure. So, I mean, as the slide suggests, it's basically the art and science of combining customer problems and aligning your organization to create outcomes which are desirable. It's as simple as that. So there are a lot of problems that we could solve in today's world, but they should be worthwhile your time and your organization's effort. So that's where I guess product management comes into the picture. You're trying to solve problems which have a meaningful impact and drive customer value at the same time creating desirable outcomes for your own company or organization.
So when you think about like program management or some of the other PM kind of roles, a lot of the responsibilities seem similar. So what do you think are the differences between product management with program or project management, and what do product managers actually do?
Yeah, good question. So typically program managers and project managers, their role in terms of like what entails compared to a product manager is quite different. But there are companies where it is kind of the same as well. Like say, for example, Microsoft, product managers are called program managers. But that's kind of an outlier. In all other companies, usually there is a clear distinction between a product manager and a program manager. And in terms of like the differences in the role itself, program managers are they focus more towards making sure that everyone is on the same page in terms of like timelines and no one's blocked by any other team and things like that. They just ensure that the project is moving forward and they help unblock in any roadblocks if there are. That's kind of like mainly what program managers do. Product management is a little different, which I can talk about in a second if I've answered this question.
Cool. So moving on, like you've been working for Tesla for a while. So what does your day to day look like?
Yeah, so day to day is it depends on what time of the month you are in, kind of, because typically towards the beginning of the quarter, or yeah, typically beginning of every quarter is when we start working on the plan that we came up with as part of the last quarter's roadmap and features that we finalized. And mainly, I guess that's where we kind of focus most of our efforts on. So yeah, day to day, a typical day to day could look like anything like brainstorming about what we should be building and why we should be building them, to put it in a nutshell. So, and even in terms of like what are we building, there are specific things we need to answer in terms of like what value are we creating for the customers, how does it impact them, are we really solving a problem, or are we just introducing something which looks cool and fancy but doesn't necessarily address the underlying issue. Things like this. We address all these questions in terms of like addressing the part of what are we building and why are we building it. The other important part obviously is when are we building this? That's also a critical part of scoping out the product itself, because again, as I said earlier, there are a lot of things that you could solve as a product manager, a lot of problems that you could take on, but when is the right time to do it is also another important thing. So yeah, we kind of like answer all these questions, put a plan together, and move towards executing them as the quarter begins.
So can you like share some examples of products that you own at Tesla, and how does this like tie into that example?
Yeah, sure. So we could take like Tesla.com as an example, which is a digital product. And I guess every product at top of the funnel starts off with a vision, because without vision, you're just going to be a headless chicken roaming about, not exactly knowing what you're tackling. But yeah, we start with a vision in terms of like what is it that we want to do with this product. And once we define that, I think things become a little more easy because everyone, the team or everyone in the organization has a clear picture on what is that we're doing as part of this product. But yeah, once we define the vision, we then do some user research. We try and understand what the core pain points are of customers and how we can build a product or build a solution which addresses those problems. And we go back and forth. We iterate multiple times. It's not like we sit behind a desk, do some user research, come up with data, crunch it, and go like, oh wow, this is the solution. This is what we need to do. It's definitely not that way. We iterate multiple times. We get it right. Sometimes we don't get it right, but that's where data and a lot of interviews, stakeholder interviews, all these come in handy. But yeah, so once we kind of like finalize that in terms of like what features do we need to build and what specific pain points are we addressing, we put those, we stack rank those in a roadmap and discuss the level of priority with other teams as well, or other product managers, to see what they are building and see if we could get some kind of, see if we could like kind of build the product together where there's an overlap, or like just let other teams know in terms of like what we are building so they are aware and they can scope out anything on their end for future releases. But yeah, once we have the roadmap, we kind of like focus on the MVP launch. And obviously for MVP, we keep it as simple as possible. We don't like to combine a bunch of things. MVP is more of a user validation. It's just a validation in terms of like what your product is supposed to be doing, and is it actually serving that purpose? That's all an MVP is for. So once we validate the MVP, we then go back to the drawing board, go look at list of all the backlog features that we have, and slowly start prioritizing them.
So, like you mentioned that you are responsible for Tesla.com. So, taking a step back, I'd like to understand, like, how do you even ideate? So, if you have an idea, so how do you start from there? Like, there is an idea which is either sitting in the backlog or something
Yeah.
that you've come up using your judgment. So, how do you validate that that's a good path to take?
Yeah, so it depends. For some products where there has been where you're launching the product from 0 to 1, as in the product has never seen the day of light, no one has ever used it before. You kind of like start off with an intuition of what your vision is. You start off with an intuition of what is it that would work and what would not work, but keeping the vision as your North Star. So for Tesla.com, I guess the vision is, make the ordering process as easy as possible. And I guess I could just summarize it and leave it at that. Make the ordering process as easy as possible. So if you start with that, right, obviously we don't have any data at this point when you're building it out for the first time. So we rely heavily on the design team, and we kind of like piggyback on their experience on how they've built previous products, or just understanding user patterns and user behavior. And yeah, from there on, they put together some designs, show us designs, and tell us that, okay, fine, these are some things which how customers can navigate while placing an order. These are all the ways they could see options, and this is how we could present information to them. And we obviously address issues like how easily digestible is the content, how easy it is to just navigate through different features and options, and just get a quick understanding of what the product has to offer. So yeah, we kind of keep all these points in mind, and we obviously zero in on a design which is not backed by any data, but more so by intuition and just what designers have come up with. Yeah, so that's kind of how we launched the basic mobile site, or even the configurator site that you see on the on the desktop. But going forward, new features that we introduced in terms of like reducing checkout time, improving click rates, all these they're heavily backed by data, and we do a lot of quantitative research and qualitative research. We talk to customers, we get their feedback, we see what's working, what's not, and combine that with our quantitative findings, and see if there are any patterns that we can kind of like fall on.
And how does that customer feedback loop look like? You said it's not always easy to quantify impact, so you need to have that constant feedback flowing in. So what does that end-to-end cycle look like?
Yeah, so we kind of like try and interview customers who are repeat customers who've ordered multiple vehicles, either with Tesla or bought multiple different products from Tesla.com. It could be just be merchandise, accessories, or any other things. But yeah, we mainly kind of like fall on them. We ask them questions like, how easy was it for you to place an order? What did you find difficult in terms of like grasping what was presented to you? And a few other things, which are never leading questions. We ask very open-ended questions, and based on whatever they answer, we obviously the feedback is sometimes way too specific, and sometimes it is open-ended. But we try and see if we can draw some patterns from the different customer interviews that we've had.
So as a product manager, like what all teams do you regularly talk to or collaborate with? Because I feel like this is not a one person job. So
Yeah.
how does that collaboration aspect look like for you?
Yeah, so we mainly collaborate. I think I spend at least 70% of my time collaborating with design and engineering. Design also maybe like 20-25%, but 60% of my time is basically with engineering, because they have a lot of questions and they're the ones who are building the product. So you need to be there to answer this question, address edge case scenarios, give them a plan on how do we approach a certain situations. But yeah, you always need to be there for them. So I spend almost 60 to 70% of my time with them. But apart from that, you also touch multiple other teams within the organization. Sales, for example, sales, operations, supply chain, logistics, and who else? Finance mainly for all the pricing related information that we show on Tesla.com. But yeah, all these teams we kind of like touch base with them for could be anything from as simple as changing the copy on the website itself to changing the prices on the configurator.
Got it. Shifting tracks a little bit, I feel like a culture of the company is very crucial for product innovation to happen successfully. So, what is it like to work for a company like Tesla? Like, what kind of cultural kind of principles are followed?
Yeah, yeah. So these 3 points are, I guess, pretty spot on. Yeah, you gotta be scrappy. No one's going to handhold you and tell you what needs to be done. Mostly, in most scenarios, you have to go figure out for yourself what the problem is and how do you tackle it or how do you address it. And obviously, there are managers and there are other people to help you along the way, but you have to kind of like take initiative by yourself. It's not like someone's always going to be behind you and hand new projects to you. So yeah, definitely be scrappy, try and get things done. That's one thing. It's also a very fast-paced environment. Things happen way too quickly. We get notifications sometime from Twitter on what needs to be done, probably the next day itself. So this happened multiple times in the past. But yeah, it's super fast-paced, and you have to be ready for it.
Rightly said. So, like you started off as a data scientist and then you transitioned into product management. I guess like most of the people who are coming here, they want to listen to that side of your story. So, I'm curious to know like what kind of triggered that transition for you.
Yeah, so I did enjoy data science a lot. It was like an enjoyed transition to product management, want to clear that air first. But yeah, I did my master's in operations research and statistics, and statistics is heavily tied to data science. Most of the algorithms that you see are you could there is a statistical side to it as well. So yeah, I started out as a data scientist, interned in fact as a data scientist as well, and it was pretty fun and enjoyed doing a lot of things, learned a bunch of stuff. But along the way, I feel like my role kind of ended where you provide recommendations to the management and the management kind of like makes decisions from there on because you're ultimately not the decision maker. Um, so I kind of wanted to transition to something where I did have the power to make these decisions. So I honestly did not know about product management at the time. I was heavily focused on researching, doing an MBA, and probably a bunch of other things. But yeah, I quickly realized that even after doing an MBA, a lot of students, they kind of fall onto product management as a first job, either for internship or even for full-time roles. So that's kind of when I even heard about product management. I quickly went back to the drawing board, started like researching more about product management, and I absolutely loved it. So yeah, that was yeah. I could talk more on this, but
If I chart
um,
out your path, like you
yeah,
basically, like how did you get interested? Like you did some research on your own, but what was the path? Like who did you talk to? Did you talk to product managers in the company? Like did you talk to your manager? Like how did those conversations happen? And
yeah.
did you really need the support of your manager or somebody else in the company who championed you?
Yeah, good question. So I did not I did not obviously reach out to my manager. That'd be the worst thing. But I spoke to other product managers internally, kind of understood what their role was and what they did. And I soon realized, like in a bunch of projects that I did myself, I kind of did some sort of product management. You could say that. Obviously, not to the level of coming up with a vision, strategy, roadmap, planning, and all of it, but in terms of like at least owning the product and seeing how it should look, feel, and what messaging it needs to convey. At least in terms of those things, I felt like it was in a way similar. So I tried and extrapolated that information or that experience that I had as a data scientist to a product management role. And when I used to reach out to other managers or directors internally within Tesla, I would kind of like connect these two together. And yeah, that's kind of like how one of the directors got in touch, and then we spoke, and then he met with other members from his team, and that's kind of how the process went.
So, if you have to like advise anyone who's looking into transitioning into product management, what would you say are the three top skills that you should be exhibiting? So, no matter like if you're in an engineering role or something else, when you're transitioning, I'm assuming you should be able to exhibit some foundational core qualities. And what would you say they are?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would pick is problem solving, and this is super cliche, what I'm going to say now, but you should definitely have the ability to like break complex problems into easy ones that someone can understand. And I guess this is true to any role that you work in. It's not even just for product management. If you're a developer, I guess it applies all the more to you as well. But in any sense, right? The ability to like look at a complex problem, understand it in such a way that you could go explain it to any other team member and make them understand as well. So it's a twofold thing that I'm talking about here. One is you should be able to understand the problem and be able to explain to someone else who has no context on what the problem is. And then from there on, I guess if you're able to rally all the team members around this common problem that you have to solve, that's a win-win. So I would definitely say problem solving is a very important thing that we look for in product managers. Communication skills are super important in terms of like how are you able to communicate your findings, or why you think certain things are more important, certain things are not so important. These things can be conveyed effectively only if you're a good communicator. And even in general, just like probably talking to team members or teammates from other organizations, you should be able to like effectively tell them what the plan is and why is it that you're doing what you're doing. So yeah, all of these things require like good communication skills. And the third thing I would say is leadership for sure, because more often than not, you wouldn't be having anyone reporting to you directly. And as a product manager, you have to influence people around you to go get something done. So you don't have direct authority over them, but you still have to get them to do it. And you can only do this if people trust you and if people think you have the skills to lead a certain project. So yeah, I would say that leadership is also a very important trait that we look for.
So you mentioned like in one of our chats about active listening and like clarity of thought or structure in thought. So if
Oh
a
yeah,
problem is thrown at you, and I found it really, really interesting. So I'd like you to kind of talk to that mental model or framework that you use.
absolutely. Yeah. So I kind of like was alluding to that based on what I mentioned earlier for problem solving. I guess it's really important to zoom out and take a high level overview of what the problem is. How do you assess it in a way that makes sense to people, to all the stakeholders involved, and how do you kind of like tackle it in a way that makes the most sense. And what I mean by this is there are multiple solutions to every problem, right? So what is the best way that you could address a problem in that conveys or at least holds the most value to you at that point in time, in terms of like impacting customer, or it could also be from monetary standpoint. So yeah, the ability to just zoom out, address a problem, and ensure that you're putting the best solution in place for that problem is kind of what I was referring to.
Cool. So this is primarily an AMA. So thank you so much, Kaushik, for giving us all your valuable insights. So Kaushik was kind enough to put a list of resources. These are things that he personally kind of took some of the courses on Coursera, Udemy. Yeah. So that.
Another quick thing I guess I forgot to mention. So as part of like the transition from data science to product management, the way I think I started it was doing these courses. I obviously didn't know anything about product management, and I obviously had to learn quite a bit before I could even like start talking anything about it. So those courses that I mentioned in the resources really helped me, gave me confidence to at least go talk to other directors and tell them, hey, yeah, I know I'm not a product manager today, but from my experience from the previous role, I certainly feel I can do all these things as required of from a product manager. But yeah, these courses definitely gave me more confidence and more context in general on what is expected from a product manager.
That's great to know. So that means that you don't have to be cut out for product management. You can
Yeah,
actually
yeah, for sure. Absolutely, anyone can be a product manager. It's seriously not. It's not as hard as it's made out to be, and doesn't really matter what backgrounds you come from. I've had people who've come from like humanities or social sciences be great product managers. So I guess it goes back to the point I was mentioning earlier, right? You should be really good at problem solving, be a good communicator, and try and lead by example. If you could do these things, these three things at least, to good level or good extent, I think that automatically qualifies you to be a good product manager.
Awesome. Yeah, that's good to
Yeah.
know. Okay, so with that, we're towards the end of the session. Thank you so much, Kaushik, for answering all these questions.